She's growling now because I haven't let her into the room. Okay. Okay. Very good. All right. She's growling now because I haven't let her into the room. And I'm getting feedback from my own. There we go. All right. Let's call to order this regular meeting of the Easton Board of Education at 7:30 p.m. on March 9th, 2021. All members in attendance. Sorry, let me make sure I have Randy. I know I have Jenny, I have Jeff, I have Gretchen and Devin. Sorry, I'm going to do a quick search here on the, it doesn't look like it. Okay, so all members except for Randy Hicks currently in attendance. Okay. Oh, and here he is. Perfect. Very good. Okay. All right. That takes us to our second item, approval of minutes. I'll do these separately because I don't know for sure that everyone was on all of them, but we'll try to move quickly. I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes from the February 8th, 2021 Easton Reading Region 9 Joint Board of Ed special meeting. Anyone? Thank you, Jenny. I see Jenny made the motion. Do I have a second? Thank you, Devin.
Second.
Thank you, Devin. Any discussion? Okay.
John?
Yes, Jeff.
Didn't we have a significant discussion about curriculum in that meeting? I didn't see it in the notes.
I don't have a fresh recollection of that on the February 8th meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember at all sort of what we got? And we could actually look back at the video. That would probably help.
It struck me that it wasn't there. Now maybe I'm thinking about the curriculum meeting. That's certainly possible, but I thought I'd throw it out there, and if anybody else had the same thought, then maybe it would be worth checking.
Okay.
If not, it's fine.
And we could add that to the motion to approve pending a review of the video of the meeting to review inclusion of references to curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound reasonable?
That'd be fine.
Jenny, would you be open to amending your motion to reflect that stipulation, sort of pending a motion to, a review of the video to evaluate the inclusion of curriculum discussion?
As long as I don't have to repeat what you just said.
Good. That sounds reasonable. Good. Devin, you
Yes.
second that revision?
Second for revision.
Very good.
Second.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Okay. All in favor? Okay. I see Jenny, Devin, Jeff, Randy. Gretchen's video is off. Gretchen, is your audio connected? Yes. Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. The motion passes unanimously. Takes us to looking for a approval of the minutes for the February 9th, 2021 Easton Board of Education regular meeting and budget workshop.
So moved.
Thank you, Jeff. Do I have a second? Thank you, Jenny.
Second.
Jenny had her hand up first. Thanks, Devin, though. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. I see everyone's hands. Gretchen?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Unanimously approved. That moves us to the February 11th, 2021 Easton Board of Education regular budget workshop. Entertain a motion to approve. Thank you, Randy. And I think, Jeff, you got the second there. Very good. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Unanimously approved. Thank you very much, everyone. All right. That takes us to item number 3, public comment. I would remind everyone to please state your street. You don't have to include your house number, but your street, as well as your town, and your name. Please also, we have a very full agenda, so we will be limiting public comment, each public comment to 2 minutes. This is just meant to help us move things along. We'll also have a public comment period at the end of the meeting for those who are interested in commenting then. We'll look for anyone who is indicating by way of using the participant window to raise their hand, or if you want to turn on your video and wave at us, we can recognize you that way as well. And I'll just give it a minute. I know it can take a minute for people to navigate the technology. And I'll ask my board members and administrators, if you see anyone, please just flag me down.
Can I read a comment from the public that I received via email that she can't be here? Or does that?
I think maybe in board member comment.
Okay.
Yep. I mean,
I'll do that.
Yep. Okay. All right. Hearing none, that moves us to number 4, board member comment. I have a feeling Devin has board member comment.
Thank you. So Tracy Carlucci from Morning Glory Lane emailed me and asked me to read this. In light of this week's pamphlet from the Citizens for Responsible Government, which was critical of the Board of Ed's DEI commitments, among other task forces, I wanted to take this opportunity to speak in support of the DEI committee and thank them for their efforts thus far. I'm hopeful that they will be able to implement much needed changes to the curriculum, hiring practices, and professional development so our children can receive a more well-rounded education that is no longer whitewashed, ultimately paving the way for this generation to have a positive impact in our communities and the dismantling of systemic racism. Thank you to the DEI committee for your commitment and efforts in this area, even in the face of backlash from this small but loud minority.
Any additional board member comment?
I've got a couple quick ones, John.
Please.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 things, I guess. One, just a big thank you to the teachers and the administration to getting our schools open and keeping their schools open. It has not been easy. It's not been out concern and fear, but always with a goal of what is best and safest for our students and our families. And I look forward to hearing from Sue and Kim as we return to our original kind of full daily schedule, hopefully in the not too distant future. And the second item is, there's been significant public comment here and other boards, Reading and Region 9, focused on the proposal, I guess I would call it, drafted by certain Barlow alumni and members of the Barlow Social Justice Group, and co-signed by, members of the boards, respective boards of education. My comment is framed more as a question. When we look at the DEI curriculum going forward, does the administration anticipate using or adopting any of the action steps outlined in that proposal? So it's more framed as a question, as a comment, but those are my 2 comments so far tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Randy. Any additional board member comment? Okay. Hearing none, that will take us to item number 5, reports. First up is Dr. Rydell Harrison.
There we go. Can you hear me? Am I good?
Yeah.
So good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to share tonight. I'm actually going to close that out and go this way just so that you can see it a little bit better. So tonight I want to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and the why of DEI. I want to start tonight, though, by responding to Randy's question. And I think it is a really good question. Of course, I've been at all of the board meetings where we've heard significant comment from the public and real concern about the documents that have been put together by community members, by former students, in laying out what their hopes are for our work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Tonight, I want to take some time and talk about what that work is, and specifically the why of DEI. But I want to just start by saying that while I appreciate the significant time, the research, the efforts made by the Social Justice Committee that is comprised of primarily former Barlow students and community members. It is important to note that it is, while it's the ER9 Social Justice Committee, or I think that's what it's called, that it's not a school or a district committee. I think that that's important to note. And while I appreciate their work, and they did a significant amount of research, I've read the entire 52-page document, I think it's 52 pages, shortly after I started as superintendent, and appreciated the level of care that was put into that. Since then, I've received a number of other proposals with people saying, hey, I came across this really cool curriculum that I think would be helpful, or, we don't really want to go in this direction, but here's an alternative curriculum. It's important to note that that's not how our curriculum development process works. And so while I appreciate the suggestions, I don't subscribe to pulling prepackaged curriculum off the shelf. When you have a group that has created that in isolation, while it may be some really good things to it, and all of the suggestions that we've received, there could be some things that we could piece together. I think it's really, really important for us to follow the typical curriculum development and revision process that we use, led by Dr. Pearson-Ugal in collaboration with our administrators, our teachers, and our curriculum committee of board members. I think that is a key component to making sure that the curriculum direction that we go in reflects the values of the board, of the administration, the direction that we want to go as a school, and really provides opportunities for our community to participate in the discussion. I think that it would be very easy to just spend a lot of money on a curriculum and pull something off the shelf and move forward. But the downside of that is that it's the development of the curriculum and putting those resources together and processes in place that I think is some of the most crucial work that it's important not to skip through that. So to answer Randy's question specifically, there were nine recommendations made by that social justice committee. I don't have a problem with all 9 of them. I think that it is important for us as a district and as a diversity, equity, and inclusion task force to really do the work and lay out the plan for us of what makes sense in our district. I think all of our board members are aware, many of our community members are aware that I've done a lot of equity work as an educational leader in not just the work in this district, but in previous districts. And each time the approach was different. Within each setting, it looked a little bit different based on where that district or that school was starting from, where we wanted to end up, and most importantly, really looking to address the specific needs that we are hearing from our students. And so, I have also received many of the correspondence of letters and emails and pamphlets, and it's just really important to note that we are creating our own path as a district, as a tri-district, and really committed to making sure that our community is brought along throughout the discussion. I think it's one of the benefits of having the DEI task force, with all of those meetings happening in a public setting, where it is an opportunity to hear from the community and to really take that input to develop a direction going forward. So tonight I want to talk about the why of DEI, which is one of the questions that I get a lot. And so board members, I emailed you a copy of the written version of tonight's presentation that I will also make available on our district website for any community members who want to refer to it later. So as we launch into this work, it's important to take time to clearly articulate our rationale. So more specifically, we want to answer 2 questions. Why should we be focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion? And then also, why should we do this now? Recognizing and celebrating the individual characteristics of all students, which is diversity, providing all students with the support they need to reach their full potential, which is equity, and creating space for the voices of all stakeholders to be included regardless of their background. That's inclusion. These are all three hallmarks of a quality education program. This can only be accomplished in a school culture and climate that ensures that all students and staff are treated in an equitable manner with regard to the social and historical context of marginalized individuals. And so we want to make sure that for people who in the past may have not had a voice, that we make sure that we give space for those voices to be heard. I think one of the best ways that we do that is really prioritizing the voices of our students, current students, and then also when appropriate, listening to former students, but really being able to get a clear picture of what our focus areas should be. So I want to frame this discussion around the why of DEI around three broad areas. So why do we need to do this work and why do we need to do it now? It's really about changing demographics. It's about social and emotional learning, and it's about our continued focus on safe school climate. None of these are, as I was preparing for tonight's presentation and looking back at older documents and older presentations, none of this information is brand new. This is all very much in line with things that we've heard over time. But I think it's important to kind of pull it together to really paint the picture that all of these pieces together really move forward our work related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. When I look at demographics in Easton over the last 10 school years, so comparing from 2010-11 to 2020-21, we see a pretty significant shift over time in the number of students of color that we have in our district. One of the things that we also looked at over time was the amount of socioeconomic diversity that has also increased in Easton. We've increased in the number of students who are where English is their second language, where they're learning English. And that really speaks to how things are changing. More specifically, when we look at this table, and board members in the document that I sent earlier, I recognize that I left out 2017-18 off the chart for some reason. So I will resend that out to you at the close of this meeting, just so that you have accurate data. So this really looks at our growth over time based on our demographics. So as you can see, this is not a surprise to anyone on the call. We've seen a significant decline in the number of students in the district over the last 10 years. And that decrease in the number of students is about 22% decrease overall, K through 8. While we've seen that number overall decrease, we've seen a pretty significant increase of 38% of our students of color among all of those categories. You'll see that for American Indian and Pacific Islander, that there's a dash there. There are some years where that number was 0. There are other years where that number was smaller than 5. And based on state guidelines, if a subgroup number is 5 or smaller, it's left out because that could end up being identifiable information. So you can see then over time the shift in the percent of students of color. And what we know from education research, that as our classrooms become more culturally diverse, it's really important for us to make sure that we reflect on how we teach our students, how we're interacting with our students, and making sure that we're giving equitable access. And then also really thinking critically about how our curriculum, our resources, our classroom libraries, how they reflect our current population of students. Some data that's not able to be caught here, because this is not data that we collect on our statewide reports. But we know that, that there has been, over the last several years, an increase in the number of gender fluid kids within our schools, even at the elementary level, students who are identifying as trans or gender nonconforming. And again, these are all things that I think about when I began my my teaching career, what doesn't seem like that many years ago, about 22 years ago, these were not even ideas or concepts that were remotely explored. And so therefore, over time, as our classrooms diversify, as our demographics change and our students' needs change, we want to make sure that we are reflecting on our practices and considering ways to better meet the needs of our students. The second why is around social and emotional learning, and really digging in and extending the focus that we already have on social and emotional learning and connecting that to this work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. In our district, we recognize the importance of attending to the SEL of all students. And as we all know, we've heard in monthly reports that the pandemic has exacerbated the needs of our students and the social and emotional needs of our students. It required us to make some adjustments to the supports that are already in place for them. According to CASEL, and CASEL is the national the national organization around social and emotional learning in schools. It's the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. They cite really close connections between SEL and equity. This is a quote that I included in the report to the board. While SEL alone will not solve longstanding and deep-seated inequities in the education system, it can help schools promote understanding, examine biases, reflect on and address the impact of racism, build cross-cultural relationships, and cultivate adult and student practices that close opportunity gaps and create a more inclusive school community. So one of the questions that I've heard people ask is, so when you talk, Rydell, about these long-standing inequities, what are we talking about? So we know that there are inequities in education, and again, in thinking about CASEL and their work happening nationally, they're looking at national data around student achievement, that student achievement outcomes are for a long time in education, there are predictable outcomes based on race, predictable outcomes based on socioeconomic status, and in many cases, predictable outcomes based on zip code. That is very much true in our state. And while that may not have been as obviously seen maybe in some of our schools over time, we know that there are remnants of those inequities that are still left over that we need to make sure that we continue to explore. I think that some of the work that we've done around this area of looking at those inequities over time has been around gender and making sure that we are considering the opportunities that we have for our boys, including our girls, and then of course now looking at gender in new forms as we are experiencing more students being gender fluid. We often look at inequities around access to resources. And so we, as I mentioned earlier, the number of economically challenged or disadvantaged students in our district continues to increase. And so we're always considering whether we're looking at the cost of field trips or making sure that students have access to materials in the classroom or outside of the classroom. Those are all of the areas of inequity that we're looking at. And then there's also inequities around race that are historically present in our schools, not just in our district, but just schools in general. And that means that we just need to make sure that we're constantly reflecting on that. And then the ability to connect that to our SEL work, I think, is really critical in moving this work forward. So we know from current SEL research that emotions matter, that students learn best when they're provided with a positive and affirming student-centered environment designed to support their unique needs. And then given the impact of COVID-19 on all of our students, it's important that we move forward with our focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion and make sure that we're making clear connections to that work with our SEL work. The next area is of the why of DEI is around safe school climate. And so in preparation for tonight, I looked at the Safe Schools climate presentation that was done in 2019. So you'll recall that last year we did not collect that survey data in the middle of the pandemic. But it still gives us the data from 2019, still gives us a picture of the experiences of our students. And so I looked at that presentation, and then I also spent some time looking at the raw data from that survey. I wanted to get a sense with from all of our students of what are their experiences in the classroom? What are their experiences in school? This is already a focus of the Safe Schools climate work, but with our focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, we really want to apply that equity lens even as we're unpacking these results and thinking about what are some of the additional questions that these may raise for us, and how do we get at that information? As you know, Easton, Reading, and Region 9 schools are committed to creating and maintaining a physically, emotionally, and intellectually safe educational environment that's free from bullying, harassment, and discrimination. During past presentations, administration identified 5 components of a safe and healthy school climate. That students have someone to talk to, that they're happy to be in school, that they're part of a community, that they're treated fairly, that they're feeling safe. These are all things that are very much connected to a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. Each year, as you know, students are given the opportunity to share feedback on the school climate survey. As I mentioned, we did not do that last year, but typically that's been the process. These survey results that I have here are from 2019. And in looking at the overall picture of those results, an overwhelming number of our students from 2nd grade through 8th grade have really positive feelings about school and feel safe. I think it's really important to note that that is a strength of ours, that our students feel safe, and sharing about negative experiences or things that they want to see better improve does not indicate that everything is wrong, but it just identifies that there might be some specific areas that we need to work on. In one of the middle school survey, it gets a little bit more specific when it comes to some of the issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I included 2 of those questions here. So one is students were asked to respond to, I have directly observed others being treated unfairly at school because of their, and then they were given a list and said to identify all that apply. You can see there from the numbers that that while 25 or 26% of our students shared that they hadn't observed students being treated unfairly at school, a high majority of them did, and indicated the areas where they have heard or seen this as an issue. So when we think about students being treated unfairly based on race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, ethnicity, disability, physical appearance even, those are all key components related to that diversity, equity, and inclusion work. Ideally, this number would be 0 in all of these categories. Now, I recognize, having been a middle school principal and been in education for a long time, that that might not happen, and that would take a lot of work for us to get to that place. But I think it's something that we would be it would be irresponsible for us to not respond to this and consider some things that we could do on a very systemic and holistic level to address some of these issues in the way that students are perceiving their peers, the treatment of their peers. We also asked in that survey if you have been treated unfairly at times by classmates. It was because of, and so they were able to indicate their perception of why they felt like they were being treated unfairly. I think it's important to note that it is the student's perception. And so what we obviously don't want to do is, if a 6th grader is saying that they felt like they were targeted based on their religion, we don't want to try to talk them out of that feeling. We want to support them in that space, because that's a part of creating that safe school environment. And so when we look at this, at this data, we can see that there are students who are who are perceiving unfair treatment in our schools based on these categories, again, that are related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And while the percent of students who would say that they haven't been treated unfairly at almost 41%, that's great for those 128 students. But we want to think about the students who that's not their experience, and make sure, again, that as we're addressing our overall climate, that we are making really smart choices in thinking about how we address some of these issues, and consider ways to explore the potential biases that may be in place that could keep us blind to some of this, or not really recognize it, or not always know how to respond. One of the things I did note was when we look at the number of students, for instance, if we zoom in on the students who said that they've been treated unfairly because of race, there are 26 students who indicated that during that period. During the year that this survey was given, Keller had 51 students of color. And so if we assume that the students who said that they felt unfair treatment because of their race, that they were students of color, that's half of that group who's experienced some of that unfair treatment. I've seen survey data, similar survey data in schools that is much more significant than this, a lot more concerning. But regardless of how small that number is or how small that percent is, I think it really highlights the fact that we are on to the right work, that we really need to consider how to build our capacity and build our tools. And it's important also to note that that it's not just this initiative that's launching this work. Some of the first conversations that I had with our administrators, they were sharing some of the ways that they've been addressing some of these issues, and then also recognizing that the need for additional support, which is one of the key pieces that I think that our focus on DEI brings to us. So while that looks at the why, so why are we doing this work? Then there's the question of the how. And so I think that going back to my initial comments about the large document that was sent and several documents and links that have been sent to me since, those are ways to recommendations on the how. So how do we go about this work? This framework is one that I proposed to the DEI task force to guide the work of the task force and to make sure that we are looking at these big 4 components of our work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So looking at governance and finance, teaching and learning, our faculty and staff, and our partnerships and the public impact, really making sure we have that community connection. That the how of this work is really to adopt this 3-phase model, to review our assets and challenge, develop a theory of action, and then develop and implement a plan going forward. I think that that some of the concerns that I've heard, just as far as well, how far is this going to go? Is anything going to look familiar? Are all of the lessons that my children have experienced over time, are they all going to change? And I think it's important to note that no, we don't expect everything to change. We want to make sure that our practices, our resources, our teamwork, our reflection, our connections with students, our materials, all of those things are reviewed with a critical eye, considering the specific needs of our students. We already have examples of this work happening. And so if you, board members, if you think back to in the fall when we presented school goals, Kim Fox-Santora shared the work that they're focused on during this school year around equity at Samuel Staples, where they reviewed their assets. So they recognized that they don't have a real clear language and resources to as a staff to consider the best way to work with students who are gender nonconforming. They've recognized some of the challenges about that. Their theory of action said if we build our capacity and knowledge around these areas as a staff, then we'll be better positioned to meet the needs of all of our students. They developed a plan for some professional development, and they've implemented that plan. And so this three-phase model really works in how this equity work moves forward. The typical way that we look at moving large-scale initiatives forward is more of a continuous improvement process, where we are analyzing data, where we are sort of making more sterile decisions based on what the data show. This work around DEI, around school climate, around SEL, it's a very different approach, because we don't have exact scientific data in the way that we have with smarter balance assessments, or with NWEA assessments, or any of our reading assessments. So that approach to looking at instructional improvement, it just doesn't work here. And if you think about what it would take for us to wait until there's a significant issue, to wait until the issue is significant enough that we have to do something, we have to really consider then what would be the impact on the students while we wait. And I think that that is one of the biggest difference to taking a much more proactive approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion versus just waiting for negative data to show up and then trying to think about the best way to respond. And so that being said, I think that it's important to note, particularly in the discussions that I've heard in several of our recent meetings and responses that I've received in email and through snail mail, that focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion is really not a political act. And so interestingly, one of the things that I hear when I'm listening to all of the comments is that the one thing that's shared, regardless of the perspective that people are bringing to the table, is that we really care about our kids, and that we don't really just care about some of them, we really care about all of them. And so from that standpoint, this work doesn't have to be a political act. It also doesn't have to be controversial. Educational equity is ensuring that each child receives what they need to develop their full academic and social potential, and taking the necessary steps to identifying and eliminating barriers that would hinder that progress. I think that it's what we want our educators to do. It's the work that we really want our leaders to lead, because it really is honing in on meeting the specific needs of each of our students, and thinking about ways to approach those needs, that we are eliminating barriers today and making sure that we are putting processes in place that new barriers don't pop up. And with that, that is the why, the very abbreviated why and how of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And with that, I'll stop sharing and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. Are there any questions? Jeff?
Dr. Harrison, thank you for that. Thank you for that review. I know you said that the first 100 days on the job was going to be a listening tour, I think is the way you put it, which I thought was very wise. And you spoke to just a couple of minutes ago, the quote, longstanding and deep-seated inequities in the educational system. In your listening tour in Easton, what specifically did you hear that led you to believe that there are longstanding and deep-seated inequities in our school system?
Sure. So Jeff, the quote that you're referring to is the one that I mentioned was from CASEL, that national organization. So they're thinking the bigger picture globally. That said, shortly after I started, I attended, so part of my listening tour is to try to get out in the community. It's been tough because in the middle of a pandemic, there aren't as many community things happening as would
Sure.
happen in a typical year. I did attend the Easton Town Party, had a blast. I had my family there, got to see some board members there. And as I was introducing to myself to people, I met a group of middle school students who were there. And I introduced myself. They told me that they went to Keller. And I said, tell me about your school. What do you guys think? And I shared this with Sue and Annie. These students launched in and they held me captive for at least 30 minutes. And they shared all of the good things. I told them they weren't allowed to use any teacher names or anything like that. But they shared experiences of gender bias that they experienced from classmates. A couple of the students talked about some of the racial slurs that they heard being used. I asked them, do you feel like you have adults that you can go to share concerns? They all said yes. That comment is also reflected in the school climate survey, that's there. And I won't get into all of the details of what they shared, but I was very impressed that they felt comfortable sharing their experiences. They had some really good language around exploring some of these issues. They had a really nuanced position. It was interesting that some of the girls in this discussion, some of their experiences around gender bias, they did mention that middle school boys are sometimes just immature, which I couldn't completely disagree with, but I also felt like they were really doing a nice job with advocating for themselves. In addition, I also spent time listening to our families. And so listening to parents, I heard from parents in both of our schools of some really positive experiences, all of the reasons why. The one thing that I heard over and over, Jeff, when I talked to Easton parents was we moved here for the schools. It was something that they really appreciated: small class sizes, connecting with staff, connecting with teachers, connecting with administrators. They also, many of them shared the challenges of not having as much diversity. And so missing that their kids were being able to learn from others with different backgrounds, and talked about, are there ways that we could be more intentional about doing that kind of work? Those were things that I heard. I listened and met with our teachers and administrators. And very early on, I think it was my second or third day on the job, some of our very eager administrators invited me to a staff meeting to listen to their staff, and they shared their stories of their individual focused work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some of the book studies that they were doing, for instance, at the middle school, their connection to DEI work with their work and focus on restorative practices, some of the anti-bias training that folks had done. They also mentioned wanting to do that in a more effective way. They mentioned, it's been great to have this sort of grassroots approach to this work, but we'd really love for us to have some leading and support in making these connections and thinking about ways to meaningfully connect with our students. So I did get that, Jeff. I also think that it's important to note that in some of those stories, I also heard people share, we've never had any issues, and everything is, just really great. And then I've also heard people share some really concerning stories about their experience. And so I think that there's sort of a wide range of experiences. What I can say was a consistent point across all kind of stakeholder groups that I met with and spoke with was that there was a real sense of care from the community and about our students, and the students, in talking with them, feel cared about. And so I think that those are two really important pieces to connect to. We also get an opportunity to hear from current student experiences as part of the DEI task force meetings. And so that's been helpful as well.
Mhm. Okay. You mentioned in your write-up that you sent to the board members that out of the surveys taken at SFCS, there were 255 responses back in 2019. I think you said out of those 255, there were 22 that expressed some concern about how they were treated. The Keller numbers are obviously considerably different from that, quite frankly, quite distressing. Keller in 19 had 334 students. How many of them answered the survey?
So the survey is only given for, to second through fifth graders. And so, Jeff, for each question, it gives the number of students who answer that specific question. So for instance, for question 1, 267 students.
No, this is 2 through 5, right?
This is 2 through 5, right?
Okay.
So the first question on the survey is, which school do you attend? And students had to check Reading Elementary or Staples. And so 267 kids answered that. But then the next question, what grade are you in? 6 kids skipped that question. So when I was looking at kind of the individual answers, I wanted to not just give sort of the overall number of kids who took the survey, but specifically that question. It gives a better and more accurate picture of how students responded.
Okay, well let's look at 6 through 8, because those numbers that you put up on the screen, if all 334 kids took the survey, and 81 said that that they hadn't experienced anything like that in terms of seeing others treated badly. That means that you had 253 kids who checked 814 boxes, and that seems like a pretty difficult situation. Now, was when you reviewed the PowerPoint presentation for the 2019 presentation to the board and to the public, did that message line up?
So when I looked at the presentation from 2019, I also looked at the 2018 presentation. The administration was highlighting some of the areas of focus. So they gave sort of an overview of kids' overall positive experiences in school, and then kind of identified some areas for to continue work on around inclusion. So there were some survey responses that indicated that there was some exclusionary behavior that was happening with students. So that was some potential focus area going forward. And then just continued work around empathy and some of the SEL work. So you can see, again, this is just another one of those examples where the SEL work really connects nicely with the specific focus around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that going forward, one of the best ways to address some of these issues is to be really specific about the issues that we're working through. I think it sends a really clear message to some of those students who are experiencing some of the unfair treatment that my experiences matter, and that people are willing to support me and listen to me and helping me process through this. So I think, Jeff, to your point, I think that what was presented was sort of a mix of here's where we are, but then also here are some of the things that we are doing and will continue to do moving forward to address the concerns.
Well, the impression that I left with that day, and heck, maybe I was the only one that left with it, but it was a pretty positive feeling about the climate and the culture of both of our schools. This kind of data kind of flies in the face of that good feeling, and so I'm anxious to learn more about what the strategies are to try to get those things addressed.
Any additional?
I'm sorry, John,
Please.
one more piece to this, and then I'll get off. But what was the parents were also surveyed during this. What were the killer parents' responses to these kinds of questions?
Jeff, that's a great question. I did not look at the parent data. I really wanted to focus, if you kind of look at the focus of the why around DEI, I really wanted to keep it very much centered on the experiences of our students and connect it to work that we're already doing with our students. I would like to go back and spend some time digging deeper into those those data sets as well, from parents, and then also from our staff as well. I will note that only about 38 to 40 or so parents responded. And so it's a low response rate if you think about the number of parents in Easton. And so I didn't expect that it would also, sort of give a real clear picture of the totality of experiences.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for Dr. Harrison?
I have a quick
Randy,
one compared to that. No, so, and Stephanie or Sue or Kim step in here, but historically, from my perspective, we've tried to differentiate our instruction, for lack of a better term, by ability. So you approach a classroom of 18 fifth graders, and maybe you'll break them up into teams, and you may have some like abilities in the teams, and when you do some small area work, so to speak, some of the kids are working in a group that maybe has some of their same abilities, be it math or reading or whatever, and everybody sort of helps each other a little bit as the teacher's doing the instruction. It sounds like we're well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, right, El, but are we differentiating now under different criteria than abilities, so to speak, to overgeneralize?
I don't know that I would think about it that way. I might need to give that some more thought, just in how to frame that. I would say that so the opposite of differentiation from an instructional standpoint is teaching to the middle, right? So there was a period in education where we sort of taught to the middle, and if you were above the middle or below the middle, good luck for you, good luck to you, hopefully you'll get it. And then we learned the need for and the skills to be more targeted for what student specific academic needs are. So I think that this focus of diversity, equity, and inclusion, you can sort of look at it as the opposite of teaching to the middle, right? And so if equity is really about making sure that every student has what they need, and if we're thinking about equity within the context of students and their social and emotional safety and feelings of inclusion in the building, those needs are going to be very different for all of our students. So I think that you can draw some similarities around sort of what it looks like to differentiate academically versus differentiating around these issues of DEI. Stephanie, you want to jump in and add to?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what you said, I actually think, Randy, well, I'd never thought about it in that way. It's actually quite a helpful parallel in some ways, that we would never consider now, based on what we know, we would never consider not differentiating, right? We want to support students and all of their strengths and all of their needs. By the same token, we should also consider all of our students and the unique individual characteristics that they bring to the classroom community and be supportive and inclusive in our instruction so that everyone feels as if they are a part of the community and that they are participating actively because the instructional experiences include everyone.
Okay. And so do you envision this, again, I don't want to get too far in, but this is sort of an equal opportunity for every person, regardless of, all the different criteria or all the different, backgrounds, whatever, everything they bring to the table, each person essentially has an equal opportunity when they enter the classroom, be it a 5th grade class or an 8th grade class or a 12th grade class. They all have the same opportunities to develop to their fullest, and paraphrasing some of the things that Dr. Harrison had on his slides.
Yes, I mean, and that's where we want to get to. And so if that's where we want to get to, we also have to understand, are there practices or things that we have in place that don't really encourage that? Is that already happening? Is that happening consistently in every setting? What do we need to sort of uncover to make sure that to be very intentional about doing that work?
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Any additional questions for Dr. Harrison? Devin?
So I just wanted to say thank you for the explanation and for the data. It's really helpful to see numbers, and I think it informs a lot of good discussion and questions. So I think thank you for that. And just that I really like the focus on the 5 competencies within CASTLE and connecting that to this work and really focusing on emotional and psychological safety, because when kids are safe, they learn best. So I think it's just a really nice way, and it doesn't, again, encourage this big curriculum change. It's really about the work that we're doing in our classrooms with curricula that we have and thinking about people in training. So I just wanted to say thank you for sharing. It's very helpful.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Very good. That will take us to our next report from Dr. Stephanie Pearson-Ugall.
All right, we're going to shift gears. So my report for this month is really to bring to the attention of the board and also the community the fact that this year students in grades 5 through 8 will be taking or have already taken the NWEA assessment in math and in reading. The assessment is familiar to our students, likely familiar to our families, but the reason I'm bringing it to your attention is that we made a very purposeful decision this year to implement a non-standard administration of this assessment. And so what I mean by that is that rather than waiting for later in the spring to give the assessment, when we would typically be looking at growth, we really wanted to have performance information earlier in the year, standardized performance information to the extent possible. And so we administered it in March. So Helen Keller students took this assessment last week. We are still completing makeups at Helen Keller, and the Samuel Staples 5th graders will take it closer to the midpoint in the month, I believe, next week. The non-standard administration means that we did not allow the number of instructional weeks to pass between what the testing norms would use for the fall norms and then the spring norms to be considered valid. Therefore, while we will get really useful student performance data that will inform differentiation, that will inform enrichment, and could inform additional SRBI support. We have to be very careful not to try and compare the percentiles to what would be typical for a spring administration, because we simply did not allow enough weeks to pass. And again, this was a very intentional decision because we want to be able to intervene with these students earlier and not wait until later in the spring. So this spring, as you know, we will also be administering the Smarter Balanced Connecticut State Assessment in May. And so by providing the NWEA assessment in March, we'll have a good amount of time to work with students, again, to enrich as well as to reinforce. And this information will inform possible summer exploration. And we'll be talking later in the agenda about big ideas that we have for this summer. And so we'll come back to this topic then. When we get later into the agenda as well, I'll share a little bit more information about early reports that we have for that NWEA data, as well as Samuel Staples assessments.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Stephanie? Okay, very good. That will, apologies, that will take us to our next speaker. Hello, Clarence.
Hello, sir. I guess we'll start off with our modified budget object summary. So, Mr. Chair, if you'd add that. As you all know, we were having some issues with our cognitive reporting, so we took the I'll call the initiative. We had a direct output from eFinance, and we tried to recreate budget object summary. It's probably a little more detailed than what you're used to seeing, but at least gives you some data. Then we sorted it by object code, so it has a somewhat similar look to the budget object summary, which you're used to seeing. We put a summary at the top and at the bottom, so you can get sort of cut to the chase. The only thing that's not a direct output is the column on the second from the right, which is the anticipated expenses. That's me saying, look, we know we're going to end up paying salaries and Social Security, so let's go and just put that down as an anticipated expense because we know those have to be paid. Everything else that's not encumbered is left as an available balance. So you could stroll, Mr. Chair, if you can scroll down towards the bottom, you see there are a lot of zeros, which means they've already been encumbered, or some things that are overbalanced. There's also some things that are in surplus. But the last page, sir, go down to the last page. To a question that Mr. Parker asked us frequently, what's the bottom line? So we're about $260,000 approximately and available after you factor out the salaries and Social Security and Medicare payments. So going forward, we'll obviously be managing the expenditures for the remainder part of the year. The things that are encumbered will stay there, but for right now, we're thinking it's worked out to be like a 1.62 or something percent up at the top. Again, sir, if you could, available balance left over. But like I said, this is a little more detailed than you all in the past, but has all our accounts and their current status as of, I think it was the 5th of March, I think when we ran the report. So if there's any questions, so yeah, 1.52 available as of the 5th of March. I'll open up to any questions if anyone has any. I don't want to take up too much time because you have a sort of a full agenda.
Yes, please, Randy.
Yeah, three things lumped into one. Grants, Fed cost share, and COVID reimbursement. Is that all?
COVID reimbursement has already been taken care of. We got our money from the state. All grants have not been applied yet. So we're trying to get some the schools to go apply to grants. We have some we have to expend before the end of the year. So that will actually increase that balance, hopefully. And what was the third one you asked?
Special ed cost share over.
That number usually comes out in March, so we haven't gotten it yet.
Okay.
Clarence, what is the 2020, 2021 period expenses? It doesn't seem to tie to anything, at least.
It's what we spent. It's what we spent in a month, Jeff. So that just tells you what we spent in the month.
I see. Okay.
It won't tie to anything because it's just the monthly expense. It's embedded in the year to date.
Period equals the current period, which is the current month.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you. I had the same question, Jeff.
Those numbers are embedded in the year to date number. The year to date numbers tie.
We had to have spent more than 220,000 in 1 month, but I won't hold you to it.
Sorry, Jeff, did you have more?
No, so all we spent last month was 220,000. Well, we could do that the rest of the way. We'd be rolling in the dough.
So here's the thing. The caveat I'll have is I have to go to confirm. Typically it's the month period, but how eFinance is defining their period, it may be the week, it may be 2 weeks. I don't know. This, like I said, it's a direct output from eFinance. I don't know how they're defining it, but typically that means the month. But I'd have to go back and for sure make sure how they're defining what the period is. So I don't really pay attention. I pay attention to the year to date is what I focus on because that's what feeds over to the balance.
I'm assuming it's a summary of the numbers that I'm seeing in that column, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Just along those lines, sorry, John, Clarence, quickly. I mean, where would you rank where we are with eFinance Plus or eFinance Minus, however you want to?
I was going to ask that question as well, Randy. I Clarence, can you give us? I'm going to say this: 20 plus years of rolling out large scale technology at a firm has left me battered and sort of scarred from that experience. I don't think I would trade places with you for anything.
I would say this. The actual eFinance Plus product, I think it's rolled out and it's where we want it to be, the actual database. The issue we're having is with the Cognos reporting, which is an add-on feature. So that's why I went straight to eFinance to create this report. It's a direct output. The purpose of Cognos is so that I won't have to do things like this. Mm-hmm. So the data itself is solid, it's working. It's the reporting aspect that we're having problems, and that's the Cognos part. And the problem I have with eFinance is for the last month and a half, they haven't been very responsive to me or Vicky. So if I have an issue with them, it's not about their actual product, it's been their customer service in the last month and a half, because we've been hammering them emails, calling, no response. So that my issue with them is more about the customer service, and I don't know what's going on, but I think they don't want to talk to us because they don't have an answer for what we're asking. So once like I said, the data itself, I feel comfortable with and how it's functioning. It's the Cognos reporting aspect of it, which is somebody's code and script. That's what's not working. The data itself is solid. It's the code and script on how to report it, which is what I, as an end user, which I need. Don't have to go do things, do a manual export and then sort and filter out to get or recreate the report. I asked them to, or not I, but Scott before me said, please make this work, and it's not working yet. So I want to be very clear to say the eFinance thing, it's working. We're using it on a daily basis. It's the Cognos reporting aspect of it that is not working. And my concern is we paid for a product and we haven't gotten that aspect of the product yet.
So, and I think so that the public is clear, right? We transitioned from Phoenix One finance and accounting software to a new system, eFinance Plus. A part of making that system so that the numbers can be readable by all of us is this reporting suite that gets tacked onto it so that it can output something that's readable to us. I think in addition, though, hasn't there been some complexity because the mapping of the fields from Phoenix to eFinance Plus, as we look at the mapping of the fields, and we'll see it later in some of the presentation, in the past, it was, here is how how much you're spending for transportation. What we're moving into, what we will now have from this point forward is, here's how you're doing for transportation for general education. Here's how you're doing for transportation for special education transportation. If we're at the high school, they now have the ability to say, show me sports transportation, right? So is that an accurate way of describing it, Clarence?
It's somewhat. That's not an eFinance.
Right.
I arrived here in November, and I'm accustomed, I'm used to sort of industry norm to have that level of detail. I assumed we had it. We didn't have it. Mm-hmm. This transition was supposed to happen in July. Because of COVID, it got pushed back. So all this sort of kinks were working out. Should have been happening during the summer.
Right.
But since it got pushed back to January 1, it's happening during the budget season.
And we had no ability to not make the transition. Is that also accurate?
Basically, Phoenix was being sunset. They announced it years ago. And ER9 basically waited to the last moment to get it done because it was going away. So I made the decision that in order to get the clarity and transparency, that we should have the account structure, be able to drill down to that level. So we were able to do it. eFinance was able to accommodate that. The problem is now transitioning from the data that was in Phoenix on December 31st to what's in eFinance now on January 1st, and the codes won't line up. And so you'll see that later on so the problem goes away next year, but for this transition period between December and June 30th, you've got this transition of accounts not exactly lining up because they've been disaggregated to a more finer detail.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Clarence. Anyone have additional, any board members have additional questions for Clarence? Okay. Thank you very much. That will take us to Jennifer Del Conte.
I'm actually going to be quite brief. There's just a couple of things that I just want to highlight in the report that I submitted this month. If you look at where we were last year at Samuel Staples to where we are this year in March, you do see a significant percentage change. In March of 2020, the percentage of students at Staples that had IEPs was about 16.6%. This March, we are at 13.8. That seems to be a significant drop. What I really do want to caution everyone is that the numbers only tell part of the story. It does not speak to the intensity of the student that we have. So in other words, one student could have a whole slew of services and needs. Another student could have simply that they really need maybe only one support. So I really think the numbers should be taken with caution. But at the same time, it really does speak to celebration that they are getting access to intervention. They're getting access to high quality instruction. And I think that really speaks to why we're seeing that change at Staples. Early intervention works. And I think that really speaks to that. The SIT process, I have to say at Staples, because we see some referrals from that end. They really are getting high quality interventions, and that really has been, I think, very supportive in making sure that the kids that are being identified as needing special ed are truly those that need special ed. It also, if you go down to the bottom where it says section 504, I have to apologize. There is a mistake in my Helen Keller numbers. We actually have 40 students with 504s, not 33. So I will be making that correction. So really, I think it's important to keep in mind the salient difference between an IEP and a 504. Both recognize disabilities. 504 strictly is about accommodation. What do they need in order to be successful in the classroom? Whereas special ed, they need that specially designed instruction. They need to have those goals and objectives, and they need to have, those the teachers with the additional certifications to really help them manage their disability and their weakness. We are also in the throes of planning for our extended school year. This is the time of year where we start looking at what student required summer programming to prevent regression. So Kayla and I are working very closely with the teachers now to really determine which student need summer programming. So that really has been our focus for the last couple of weeks. Did anyone have any questions for me?
No questions? Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Jen.
Hey, John, I'm out of order, but I did have a question for Clarence. And he reminded me because he resent the insurance report. Clarence, do you know off the top of your head how many months have been deposited into our deposits account? We're 8 months into the school year. Have we deposited like 6 or?
Randy, I'd have to look at the actual bank statements, and I don't have those in front of me, but I can get that information for you.
Okay. Fair enough.
Thank you. All right, moves us to our building reports. Kim and then Sue.
Everybody, let's see. If I draw your attention to the enrollment numbers that I submitted, we have welcomed 8 students from temporary learning from home. So in sharing that with you, we have 6 of the 29 classrooms that have no remote learners, and 1 classroom with as many as 6. All of the other classrooms have between 1 and 4 students who are learning from home. In addition to that, we have a number of families who've contacted us to say that their children will either start Monday the 15th or shortly thereafter. But we are expecting by March 31st, 11 more students returning to Samuel Staples full-time, which we are thrilled about. It's wonderful. I also wanted to share with you that the PTO had been in contact with Reading Elementary School, and we joined forces for the last couple of weeks in having a coin war fundraiser for a Houston-based charity called Kids Meals Incorporated. And what this organization does is that they provide nutritious meals for the underserved children in the Houston area. And just $2 buys a meal for a child. And Samuel Staples, in coins, for a week and a half, collected $3,292.43. Reading collected $2,000 in coins, making us the local heroes of the coin war. But more importantly, the kids in Houston are the big winners. That is a lot of money that our incredible, generous kids saved. And they, as they were getting out of the car, they were so excited to share where they found coins, from whom they collected coins, and where they could deposit their coins. They were really proud of themselves. Mr. Brownstein and I are very proud of them as well. So they did a great, great job. It's an impressive collection, and congratulations to the Kids Meals of Houston. I also wanted to share with you that my 10-month office assistant resigned. She's going to accept a 12-month position at Reading Elementary School, the aforementioned elementary school. So we've just posted for a 10-month Samuel Staples office position. We have a special education teacher named Janine Martin, who just delivered a beautiful baby boy. So we have hired her long-term sub replacement, and his name is Mr. Kevin Murray, and he'll be with us throughout the duration of this maternity leave. Wanted to share that on Friday we have another minimum day, and the feedback from the Helen Keller and Samuel Staples staff was so incredibly positive from our implicit bias training with Jackie Whiting that Sue Kaplan and I quickly reached out to Jackie Whiting and asked her, would she consider doing part 2? And so she will be doing part 2 of implicit bias training for our staff on Friday. I also wanted to share with you some kindergarten enrollment numbers. We have, between the contacts of our local preschools and parents who've either moved to town or parents who called on their own to say they have a child that's eligible for kindergarten in the fall, we have 76 potential kindergartners. And this week we disseminated packets, and we gave out 40 registration packets. And just for a point of comparison, I think Mr. Zachary distributed you the enrollment numbers from Malone and Mr.
Next room,
Thank,
MMI.
thank you. So Dr. Prouda had projected 108, and Mr. Malone et al. Are projecting 96. And the only other thing that I wanted to share was that we were going to administer the NWEA in math for grade 5 students next week, but Dr. Pearson, you will already announce that. Any questions for me?
Just the 76 vis-a-vis years past, is there anything we can glean from the 76?
No. That's the short answer.
Perfect.
I will
Okay.
say this to you, Randy. It is the most packets we've ever collected, distributed.
Mm.
That is promising. In addition, as you know, we're still registering a number of kids who are moving into town. I'm giving a tour at the end of the week to a new family that has a child entering first grade and another child entering kindergarten for the following year. So I'm not entirely certain if the 76 is a solid number.
I mean, could it be 108?
No, I doubt very much it'll be 108.
Okay.
What does your crystal ball say, Kim?
Right.
We all have to wait on your crystal ball.
My crystal ball says 82.
82. Okay.
Perfect. Okay.
You got a nickel bet on that, Jeff?
Sure. I'll
Yeah,
take
That's
the
too
over.
rich for him.
All right. Jenny.
Kim, it's just kind of a funny coincidence comment. If you have ever heard me remark about the examples and the positive experiences I've had with technology integration in Keller, it's because of the work Whiting's when she worked in New Canaan,
Really?
when she was worked in the library and the media center there. She was just absolutely phenomenal, and she is my model of what tech integration, like meaningful technology integration should look like. So to hear that she's doing the kind of work that she's doing, in this different role is not surprising. And I'm just thrilled to hear that she's that your staff is getting to know her.
Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jenny. Any additional questions or comments for Kim? Kim, thank you so much. And thank you to the PTO for organizing the coin war. I love that so much. Love that they did that and love that we had such a positive outcome.
I will indeed share. Thank you.
Sue.
I love going last for these administrative reports because my report gets shorter and shorter as everybody speaks. So school at Helen Keller Middle School is starting to feel a little bit more like the old school in the sense that, as Kim described in her school, our cohort C is decreasing, and a little bit more on that in detail in a second. The warmer weather today just changed the whole atmosphere. Kids were going outside with classes. It was a very encouraging sign for the coming weeks. The fact that our vaccines are made available to staff members is wonderful by the government, by the governor. And that too is putting a great smile on people's faces as we all kind of see the end of the tunnel approach. We could see the light at the end of the tunnel. At this point in the school year for our evaluation cycle, meetings are being held with non-tenured teachers this month to actually see how their first year, so to speak, has gone so far. And in total, we have 5 non-tenured, so new teachers, plus we have 2 special ed non-tenured teachers on staff. So those meetings are going on this month. Specifically to cohort C, at this point in time, I'd like to just announce that school-wide, we are now 86% in person, with 14% obviously still in cohort C. Grade to grade, there's a pretty big variance there. So for 6th grade, we have 85% of the students in school, In seventh grade, we have 93% of the students in the building. And in eighth grade, we have 81% of the students eligible to come in here. So a wide variety, but overall 86% of the population is in the building, which is a wonderful thing. Jen Del Conte previously pointed out that we have 40 students with 504 plans, and that's a high number for us. That's 12% of the total population. The trends we're seeing in our school is really no different than trends that are happening in other middle schools that I'm aware of. So when I look at the total numbers, we have 25% of the students at Helen Keller that have either an IEP, which provides them specialized instruction by a special ed staff member, or a 504 in place for them. The breakdown of those 40 504s, I think, is kind of significant as we talk about lots of different topics that we have been talking about in terms of student growth and how they're doing during the pandemic. So of the 40 504 plans, 22 of 55% are specifically for students with a diagnosis of ADHD who need some sort of accommodations within the classroom through regular education. And then the other significant grouping of students, we have 10 students right now with 504 plans for mental health diagnoses. And there's a uptick there for sure. Specifically, the most of them are in eighth grade at the moment. And it's just a number that we haven't seen. And so we also have never seen a pandemic like this before. Overall, by grade, in sixth grade, 10% of the children have a 504 plan, seventh grade, 11%, and in eighth grade, 16%. So these are kind of big numbers. And typically in any other year, I will tell you also that as students enter middle school, and then it's consistent that by the time they get eighth grade, the numbers of 504 plans go up a little bit, but not to this extent that we've seen. In terms of our SIT numbers, we're having another data team meeting tomorrow to review some academic data and make decisions about whether to move more students into tier 2 or 3 for support. Again, the one that sticks out to us though is last week we did have a behavioral data team meeting with our student support group, and eight students that were not previously receiving tier 2 support in that area since January have joined the numbers. So an alarming number, 18% of the students are receiving either tier 2, 3, or group counseling at Helen Keller Middle School. So it's keeping our counseling staff fully booked and very busy. And I say that as a counseling staff, it's a combination of students who report into Jen Del Conte as SPED providers, in addition to two people who report directly into us on the regular ed side. And that's my report. Thank you, PTO, for dropping off snacks last Friday. Keep it coming. You don't know how happy it makes everybody on a Friday morning to see those. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Any questions from the board for Sue?
Just a couple of quick ones.
Please.
Sue, I'm looking at your sheet here, and in July you had 325 students, and then it dips down in September, and then it rides back up again to now 322. When you look at the school, I mean, are you basically flat? Are you 3 down? Are you 2 up? How do you look at the school population?
So if we came into the school year thinking based on the Prouder projection that we'd have 316. So right now we're at 322, but you could see in the middle section of my report, Randy, there's some pluses and minuses. So while students continue to come in fact, we have a new student joining us on Monday who's not in this report, will be in next month's report, along with anyone else who knocks on the door. But there's some pluses and minuses going on. So there's a lot of movement in and out on that we haven't seen, but we're higher than we expected, certainly from Prouder's projection at the beginning of the school year. I point out too, Randy, that the largest grade that we have right now is 8th grade. So that grade leaves us next year. And in comes Kim's 5th grade class. And according to the Malone and McBroom, that's going to bring us another 100 students. So 108 out, 113 out, and 100 in.
Yeah, but just specifically, the July number of 325, where'd that come from?
What we actually had enrolled as of in the summertime. Okay.
And Kim details open choice by grade or just overall in the school. Do you have a number for open choice at Keller?
Boy, I don't have it all. I don't have it on the top of my head, but I will include that in my report in months future.
Okay, I was just curious. Okay. And I guess you touched on it, that the weather today was great. Hopefully light at the end of the tunnel, public health sentiments sort of improving, I think, across the board. I mean, I'm hoping that you're starting to see some of that trickle down just in school atmosphere, or not yet.
It's really hard, Randy, because middle school students, in fact, I read an article this evening before the meeting about the best part of a day for middle school students are typically the unstructured times of passing, going into the locker room, enjoying each other's company. That's what they are all driven for. And none of that is available to them this year because of the restrictions due to the pandemic. So it's better in the sense that when we go into classrooms, there's more dialogue live with the teacher, right? Because there's more people in the classrooms. Yeah. The students who are home are very present, also participating. But when you have more voices in the classroom, it's a richer exchange, a more natural and richer exchange live. And and that's what I meant by it feels more like school. There's a lot more great discourse going on in the classrooms.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions or comments for Sue? Okay. Thank you very much. That takes us to board committee reports. I'm sorry, Jeff, yes?
Yes, I have one.
Very good, thank you.
It's the Tri-District Food Committee. And this year is the last year of a 1-year contract with 4 years of renewals with Chartwell. I asked Clarence about where we were in terms of financially, as well as my hope that we wouldn't have to go back out for back out to bid. That I was hoping that we would just be able to extend the winning bid another year, and it seems like the state is already taking care of that for us, directing all of the districts to maintain the same food provider for next year. So I think we're set with that. I also asked Clarence for some information about where we stood financially in terms of the monies that we take in for food service, and we had a pretty healthy balance. Clarence believes that most of that, if not all of it, is gone, and that we may need to dip into our reserve in order to be able to get us back to zero. It's not surprising. Of course, it's disappointing, but it's not surprising given that we don't have half the revenue that we used to have coming in, and we've certainly made available a lot of free meals for an awful lot of families. So it was, it's just doing the right thing. It just has a financial impact. So when we finish the year, or when we get down close to the end of the year, hopefully Clarence can have a final number for us, and we can understand what the impact is as a tri-board. In fact, maybe having that at the tri-board meeting in May, Clarence, might be the best way to go, and then we can make proper adjustments going forward.
Jeff, I may make one
sure, please.
correction. The state granted, they didn't mandate actually they gave the option to districts. We opted into the option. So you all may just want to, dot the I's and cross the T's and accept that that additional year and with a board motion, but it was an option, and we accepted it given the same rationale you articulated is one of the reasons why we indicated to the state we'd accept the extension.
Okay, in the original contract, they charge us an administrative cost, which goes up a little bit every year. Is the assumption that the usual increase will be applied for next year?
We haven't had the discussion with Chartwells. We've been more focusing on trying to, stay in the black. So it's one of those things we're trying to, ships taking on water. So we're bailing water, and next year we're trying to get there after we survive this year.
Okay. Well, Chartwell has been a great partner. They've been a great group to work with, and so I'm glad to hear that we're taking the opportunity afforded to us by the state to be able to maintain that relationship another year.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Devin, Jenny, and Gretchen, you were all on the last meeting for the curriculum committee. Would you like to give everyone an update on some of the outcomes from that?
Devin probably has the vocabulary and background to articulate it best. Can I punt to her?
Of course.
So we talked about how the middle school math curriculum team, math specialist and teachers were going to meet this summer to work on developing a curriculum aligned to the Connecticut standards, which are the Common Core standards. Basically, I think it was defined as bring the best of the best to our students in Easton. This allows for, really focusing on what students in Easton need, and at the same time of bringing the best to the best is a way to, not increase a huge amount in terms of financial impact to the schools, to the community. Did that? I feel like I missed.
Great. No.
Can I just add a little bit to it?
Please.
I think one of the main points was that it's in lieu of adopting a new textbook, right? That it's sort of an assemblage of current, best practice resources that the word kind of distilled or selected, that the team of teachers will work together to really pull together from, as Devin mentioned, the best of what's available to align, to standards. Certainly, Dr. Pearson, you all can chime in if we're not doing a good job of articulating this, but we, the committee supported their ability to, move forward in a substantive way with that work over the summer.
I think they committed to showing some samples at some point in the future as well. So just so people could see kind of what that collection of resources looks like, since we're more probably familiar with what a textbook looks like versus like what a unit of instruction would look like at 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade.
So I'll just add to that I just want to be clear that the summer work will include creating a shared and aligned across the two districts pacing calendar that will be followed by all teachers. So while they're going to use an array of resources, the individual teacher will not be on his or her own simply selecting, today I want to use this, tomorrow I want to use this. They're going to work together to make those decisions this summer, and then check in over the course of next year to monitor and adjust. But the teachers will be following the pacing calendar that's created by the Easton and Reading collaborative group this summer.
Very good. Thank you. Any additional board committee reports? Hearing none, we'll move to discussion and possible action. Our first item is a possible executive session to discuss the special education settlements, essentially to consider recent litigation, which is a permissible reason to move into executive session. I would look for a motion to adjourn to executive session to consider recent litigation and invite in Dr. Harrison, Jen Del Conte, and Dr. Pearson Ugal.
So moved.
Thank you,
And
Jeff.
Clarence or
I need me if you want the bills paid.
And Clarence, thank you. Jeff, is that your move?
Yes, yes.
Motion, thank you.
Please add Clarence.
Thank you. And sorry, Clarence. And Randy, you second?
Sure, yep.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you, Gretchen. Unanimously moved to executive session. So just for the public, so the way that this will work, I'll move us into a breakout session instead of moving everybody here into the waiting room. We'll go into a breakout session. I will pause the live stream on YouTube and then we'll start it up again in a moment. We're not required to, but I think it's a reasonable practice to say we're going to try to get back here in 15 minutes. And if we're not, I'll try to stop in and say, hey, we're going to be another 10 minutes or so. Jen, is that a reasonable, that sound like a reasonable amount of time, 15 minutes? And you're on mute.
15 or less, yes.
Okay, 15 or less. Very good. All right. So everyone just bear with me as I move us in there. Very convenient to have Jenny and Jen. If everyone else could coordinate their names in the future, that would be much better. Okay. Rydell, Randy, Jenny, Jen, Jeff, Devin, Gretchen, where are you? There you are. Very good. Board, you should now be able to move into the breakout rooms.